Whitehorse is the sum of two parts, Melissa McClelland and Luke Doucet. They each had their own solo careers, as I'm sure most of you know, but I am talking to those who didn't know that, or haven't heard them or seen them, or haven't discovered them. Luke was on stage with Sarah McLachlan, pivotal in her band. Melissa had her own solo career. When they finally met, sparks flew on and off stage, and they became a couple. They fell in love. They got married, have a wonderful life. They did a series of, when everybody was in lockdown, they did a series of happy hours, mid-afternoon, where they would sort of push the living room furniture aside slightly and set up a laptop and play to it, to all of us. And some of those sessions, many of those sessions were the highlight of my day. They got me through. Now, they are Juno winners, but they're not resting on their laurels. They're going to get out there and they have a date at Massey Hall, a date in Ottawa National Music Centre, and they're going to be touring extensively in 2022. The new album is called Strike Me Down. And here's the thing about it. You can't pin Whitehorse down. They're either a country band or they're not a country band. They're a rock band, not a rock band. They're a pop band, not a pop band. They're a blues band. Well, actually what they do is they reinvent the blues in their own style. They have those kind of chops, certainly with Luke. And sometimes the guitars are just crunching. You wonder what you stepped into. Other times it's got ABBA vocals in their harmonies. So I love these people as people, and I love the music as brave and forward-thinking and to be watched and listened to and hopefully appreciated. Here's a conversation with two beautiful people, Luke and Melissa, Whitehorse. All right, let's do a roll call here. Melissa McClelland, are you there?
I'm here.
Luke Doucet, are you there?
I am. I'm right here.
Wonderful. There's three of us now. It's warm and fuzzy. I will tell you a couple of things. The last time that we actually physically saw you was on the Juno couch in Calgary on the street. And you were all dolled up. You were just spick and span and heading for the Junos, and I believe you won that night, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So years later, congratulations.
That was...
Thank you.
And I got to tell you, one of the ways that I got through the pandemic and the lockdown was watching your online sessions in the afternoons, trying to figure out. It was Luke looking at the screen, trying to figure out if it was recording, if it was going out, if it was actually working, and how to turn it off. Everybody's got a problem figuring how to turn it off when you're ready to shut it down. Did you have as much? I laughed my ass off watching you guys do that. How much fun did you have in that living room?
It was fun. It was stressful, but I say in a good way. It kind of like got our blood pumping again. But yeah, it was just laughable how every week there was some different technical difficulty, and we're not good with that stuff. We are not good with that stuff.
Very few people are.
So yeah, and I think it was such a unique circumstance. Everybody was trapped in their living rooms. We were trapped in our living room. We've never expected to perform from our living room and setting up all of our own stuff and taking care of the visuals and sonically being in charge of all of that. We couldn't have predicted that. And, everybody in the world was kind of caught off guard with what was going on. And so it did feel good to kind of just like jump into something kind of unexpected or unfamiliar. And yeah, I mean, it was very amateur hour over here.
Yeah. Well, here's what I related.
But, it kept our calluses strong and our voices working, and we need that. We need that to feel alive.
Yep. Luke, I got to tell you, I will never forget as long as I live, because I identified with it totally. The look of you staring at the screen with your mouth sort of agape, trying to figure out. I don't think you knew that you were actually live at the time, but I so identified with it. I had the same sort of, what am I doing? What have I done? Sort of feeling, and you are my champion.
Well, so I don't know if this is something you experience or not, but you know those dreams. If you don't have them, you've heard about them. It's the dream where you're walking through your junior high school hallways and you realize you have no pants on, or you're about to go on stage. And I have this dream once a month, right, where I'm about to go on stage playing in Sarah McLachlan's band or something, and I realize that my guitar has no strings on it, that my pedal board hasn't been plugged in 6 months, that I haven't actually learned any of the songs, and I'm also wearing no pants. Yes. And I'm about to go on stage, and I realize, oh my God, I'm completely doomed. This is terrifying. Well, I sort of felt I had those flashes of that when we were trying to get ourselves up and running to do our happy hour sort of live stream, because it's just that situation where it's like there's no possible way we can manage all these details without completely falling apart in spectacular fashion. And I feel like at one point, you know, Melissa, comes from a home that celebrates dreams. And so at one point I was thinking about, well, what do dreams really mean? You know, why do we have these dreams? And so I did a little bit of reading. And all I could come up with is that you have dreams like the one I just described or plane crash dreams, which I also have frequently, which is not quite as funny, but they're not boring anyway. You have these dreams because it's the only way to prepare yourself and to prepare your fight or flight instincts for the eventuality that something this terrifying actually comes to pass. Because there's certain things in life you just can't prepare for.
That's right.
And maybe a global pandemic and having to do your own live stream happy hour show is actually one of them. It's on the low end of the danger scale, but it's one of those things. And I had that feeling. That was the feeling I had. It's like, okay, here we go. All of those dreams were in service of getting me ready for this.
I mean, there was something apocalyptic about the whole thing too. You know, like we're all facing something pretty extraordinary, and all we could do is like put on fancy clothes and our slippers, and while our 7-year-old son jumped on the couch behind us, and just like embrace it.
Yes, he was there. I remember. Listen, and for the audience, are they kept somewhere? Can we go and look at them again?
That's a really good question. I think they're available to our Patreon members.
Okay.
I believe that is the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if we ended up putting them on YouTube or not, but
I don't think so. Yeah. I think they're available to people who have signed up to be Patreon members on the Whitehorse page.
And here's a question I can't answer, and I'm going to ask it. Any of the tracks from Strike Me Down end up on those live sessions?
I don't think so.
You know, one of the things that's unique about Strike Me Down as a record is that unlike Modern Love and unlike a record that shall remain nameless because it's not coming out until January, Strike Me Down was written in the studio with Gus Van Gogh, our producer, and with Chris Soper and Jesse Singer, who are this little crew of people we've made music for in the past. So they weren't songs that were written around the proverbial campfire where we could just pull them out and play them because we had played them a million times because that's the way they were conceived. Sure. They were songs that were largely built in the studio. So with the exception of 1 or 2 songs, Strike Me Down was a studio record. So it just, you know, those songs will come alive when we have a chance to rehearse properly and actually go on tour. So the simple answer is, I think no. I don't think we actually played any of those songs.
No, we've started pulling out some of the songs and playing them as a duo. So yeah, it's happening. But at that point, we weren't playing them live.
When do you next play live? I mean, live, like stage, Spittle.
Well, we just did a whole summer of festivals, which was pretty amazing. It felt really, really good. We traveled around the country and played a lot of shows. I don't think we're playing
March 3rd.
March 3rd is the next one.
Massey Hall.
Massey Hall, baby.
Wow. Holy spit.
Yeah, Massey Hall, March 3rd. And then we have March 19th at the NAC in Ottawa. And those are sort of the dates those are anchor dates, and the plan is to do a Canadian tour. So we have yet to announce the rest of the tour. I know everybody's waiting with bated breath to see if if touring is realistic or not. And we're hoping and optimistic that it is. And we have every expectation that these shows are all going to happen. It's far enough away that by then the fourth wave of this plague we're enduring will have passed, and we're all going to be vaccinated and Bob's your uncle.
Like well over the 18th wave.
Did you feel safe out there doing those concerts?
Yes and no. There were, we were on airplanes and around crowds of people. So there were definitely times where it felt risky, and obviously depending on the location, what province we were in, restrictions varied. But we were definitely at a point where we're fully vaccinated and we need to work, and it's time to, maybe take some calculated risks. But we never felt like we were doing anything reckless at all. A lot of the festivals really were careful about safety, some more than others, but all across the board, it felt pretty good.
I mean, our shows tend not to have mosh pits, so that
unfortunately
helps. That helps. Although we did play one in Victoria recently, in Langford, maybe?
Langford, yeah.
It was just outside Victoria.
Right.
And it was, it was a fairly young crowd of people who and the rest of the bill was sort of energetic and youthful and rock and roll. And so I think people were taking that as an opportunity to kind of let loose for the first time. And although people were cool and respectful, but I remember looking at the audience and thinking, yeah, this is borderline. Like this is okay. It wasn't a mosh pit, like I say, but people were, they were really trying to forget what we're living through, which I think is our job, kind of as when you make rock and roll, that's kind of the point. But the risks are higher right now.
I mean, who's making rock? What is rock and roll anymore? I mean,
that's such a good question.
Yeah.
I would say that I've been thinking about the Stones a bit. Charlie Watts passed.
Yep.
And also, I think Keith Richards had it right, and maybe he got this from Chuck Berry. But basically, just the concept being that modern rock music doesn't have a lot of roll in it, and it's irreducible. You can't take, if you take the roll away, you're left with things that are less. I don't really like rock music if it doesn't have the roll in it. But at the same time, rock and roll, I think a lot of music that passes for country these days is rock music. And a lot of music that when we think it's rock and roll, we'll play our songs and people say, oh, you're a country band. And then if we go to the southern states and play those songs, we say, oh, you're a rock and roll band. Just the context really matters.
There is a spirit of rock and roll. I feel like every genre, whether it's, punk or country or rock and roll or, usually the mainstream does kind of co-opt a genre, and then it becomes a little more cookie cutter, and you kind of lose the original spirit of that genre. But it's still, rock and roll is alive. It's still out there.
Yep.
That's for sure. You just have to weed through the other stuff.
You know what attracts me to artists, especially artists I've never heard of or I have yet to discover, and that is I can tell the bands that have gone through rock and roll school, like they paid their dues. You can tell. You can tell they're kind of beaten up and like novels that have the edges have kind of curled a bit, but contained therein is the heart and soul of rock and roll. That's what I'm looking for.
So you're talking about the dog-eared pages on a paperback.
Yeah.
And it's like you can sort of rock and roll musicians. They all have their ears folded over a little bit, like pages, well-read pages on paperback. I think you're right. It's interesting though. Like, do you know Gary Clark Jr.? Sure. So Gary Clark Jr. He's a great, he's a wonderful, amazing blues guitar player from Austin, Texas. And, when I heard him play, because every once in a while, it used to be back in the day in the 80s and 90s, every 3 years there was a new savior of the blues. And, most of the time they were terrible and they were just desecrating the graves of, Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf.
Yep.
But, once in a while a bright light would come along and be really exciting. And when Gary Clark showed up and I heard him play, and I was like, oh my God, this guy has played 1,000 gigs in a small smoky blues bar, in many small smoky blues bars probably across the state of Texas for sure, maybe even in other states. You could hear you could hear that dog-eared, well-read page on paperback in the way that he was playing, you know, and it was a palpable thing. And I think I know what you mean.
Well, I look at the titles off of Strike Me Down, and the closest you come to rock and roll, well, is Seven Deadly Sins, kind of like almost you get into almost heart vocal territory. But I really liked Please Maria. Please Maria's got a great rockin' thing to it. Can I play that one?
Yeah, please, absolutely.
Could I play that for the people? How did that song come together? Who wrote it?
Well, I wrote that one, and you know, you're right to identify rock and roll, and it's funny, that was I didn't see that coming, but the setup that we've just given it so far is appropriate. And talking about Keith Richards and rock and roll, and the fact that you can't take the roll away from the rock, and that you know, it's just a song of unrequited love. It's just a song about a sad sack dude who wants one more chance to hang out with somebody that he likes. But the musical spirit of it is very much in you know, the spirit of the Rolling Stones and of Muddy Waters and of, I mean, I suppose you can probably hear some more modern blues, whether I'm talking about Jack White or you know, maybe even Gary Clark or the Black Keys, but it's definitely rooted in that magic period between 1959 and 1965. True. Which to me is the golden age.
Who wants to talk about 4 More Miles? I got pulled into that song very quickly, and I can't quite figure out whether it's the background, the band, the riff going on in the back, whatever. It just pulled me in.
Yeah, we recorded that one in LA with Gus and Jesse and Chris, and Luke had the idea for the song, and then everyone just kind of started jamming, and it was like there was just a total vibe going. I think even our son Jimmy was like playing sitar or something, and like it might as well have been like a hookah in there. And I remember it was just like we were recording in this beautiful home studio and in this backyard that had like a giant orange tree, and I think I had just like made a phone call, and I was walking back to the studio, and I could walk under the orange tree, and I could smell the oranges, and the sun was going down, and I heard the music like wafting from the studio, and it was just kind of this like meditative drone, and they just played it over and over again, and then the song was just kind of created. And you know, we wrote this record, you know, it was Trump era times when we wrote it, and I think it was during the election, and so you know, everyone was uncertain as to whether there would be 4 more years of Trump. So I think that's kind of, if I'm telling that right.
Yeah, I mean, the 4 More Miles was just a euphemism for the possibility of having 4 more years of that insanity.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yes, I remember the dread. I wanted to ask, as an aside, I want to talk to the songwriter guys for just a second, the songwriter yous. It started a conversation a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, with Ed Robertson from Bare Naked Ladies, and then with Martha Wainwright and several others, and it was the idea that some songwriters will write about anybody other than themselves. They'll write about their neighbors or their family or their or character or someone that they've run across or a conversation that they hear. And some of them actually never cross that red line and start writing about themselves. Mm-hmm. And I asked Ed, I said, how long did it take? He said, it took me 20 years. And then all of a sudden, one day I woke up and realized that the red line was inside of me. And Martha Wainwright, she just writes, that red line was born inside her. She's going to write about what's around her.
Yeah.
How about you guys? Are you protective? What's your approach?
Well, that's interesting.
It is a good question, especially because some of the, this music that we've made in the last year, Modern Love and Strike Me Down, these are really, the stories are really personal, but at the same time, I know this is probably an unsatisfactory answer to your question, But we do both, and we often do both in the context of the same song, where it's like, well, this particular stanza or this line, this is absolutely autobiographical. But unfortunately, the thing I say about it next is complete bullshit. We just made that up. So, anybody looking to glean insight into the minutiae of our personal lives is going to get snippets of things that are real and snippets of things that are completely false. And I think about my mother, who once said, I think it's a Shakespeare quote. I think she said, don't never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Yeah. And I think we try not to forget that. Look at this, there's absolutely massive nuggets of autobiography in our songs, and then stuff that just doesn't fall there.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not protective. We are, both of us, I'm speaking for you, but I might be wrong, but I feel like we're both, as writers, we can't help it, but just kind of lay it all out there. But yeah, like we've said, it's not strictly autobiographical. I feel like to be a good writer, you need to reach beyond yourself, and not just tear pages out of your diary. You have to observe the world around you.
Exactly.
And, create stories and see stories that are there that other people may not be seeing.
When I think about someone like Elvis Costello or Tom Waits, like those are two writers I always think about who are constantly aggrandizing the normal things in life, and they make them really interesting. But at the same time, you mentioned Martha Wainwright, and she's a solipsistic writer, but in the best possible way. I guess it's just absolutely fantastic. And I don't feel like one or the other are better. I think we tend to protect ourselves by employing one when we need it and the other when we do.
And then he said, segueing quickly into a track, am I just going to stand there while you steal my girl? It could be a novel you've read. I don't know. Take me through that.
I was in Mexico with my little brother. We had pulled an all-nighter. And it was like 7:00 in the morning, and we're in this little cabana together, and we're like we're each sitting on our beds, just like sort of looking at each other, that stunned look on your face you have when you've been up all night. And it came to me, like when I wrote that riff, in my mind, that was the entire song. I was like, I just want to write a song that has that lyric. And he laughed and was like, that's such a great lyric. And it reminded us both of something that David Lowery would write. David Lowery from Cracker and Camper Van Beethoven. Yes. And my brother and I have bonded over David Lowery and the various iterations of his rock and roll life. So that was it. And then from there, the story sort of bloomed. But it was really centered around the idea of, like, wouldn't it be hilarious if an entire song was just that one line? Because it's so pathetic.
And it all worked out. And it's your single, right?
Yeah. And, we actually recorded that song for Modern Love, and it wasn't quite clicking into place. And then we brought it to the sessions with Gus, and, he worked his magic and just, it suggested a few tweaks of the song, a few changes here and there, and it just kind of lifted it up to this really exciting place. So it was really fun to hear that one come together.
Which came first, Strike Me Down as an album title or Strike Me Down as a song? Strike Me Down,
the song, was actually a song that we recorded during our Panther in the Dollhouse sessions, which was our last. Yep. Yeah, that was our last full-length album before the pandemic. And that it was so hard to sequence that record. We had like 4 extra songs, and we really couldn't decide which songs to leave off. It was like, usually it's pretty obvious, but it just wasn't with that record. And so we ended up leaving off Strike Me Down, and we were just like, we love this song so much. And we were just kind of not happy with the fact that it didn't end up on the record. And then kind of last minute, we decided to add that song to this record because it just really fit. It fit the whole vibe. Lyrically, sonically, it just worked.
I love the fact that it's the last track on the album, because I'm finding there's a pattern with some artists that's their message. The last message they want to leave you with is the strongest message on the album. And I like Strike Me Down up for that.
There's something sort of quasi-religious about that idea, obviously, being struck down.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things that because we've been talking about this record a lot in the last little while, obviously, and what we sort of landed on is that we're hoping that it inspires people to be reckless in some capacity. And I realize that there's a risk this day and age suggesting being reckless has big consequences, because we're living in a pandemic and people actually
be reckless but wear a mask.
Yeah, be reckless but wear the mask on. But I think that in light of the fact that that's what because the record's, it's dynamic and it's big and it's explosive, and whereas Modern Love was really intimate, and this record it's on fire. It's like Sambuca, or it's like it's like a flaming Sambuca shot. And I think that's kind of what we wanted. So at the end of it, to be struck down at the end of that, it's like you've played so fast and loose, you've been such a hedonist and so reckless and so dangerous. At the end of this, of course, you're going to be struck down. Like it's the way the story goes, and so I think it's really fitting that that's the way the record ends.
But Luke, you of all people know that if you mess around with flaming Sambuca, you end up with burnt lips and a ridiculous hangover.
See, people are going to think that you and I have spent enough time together over the decades. I have ruined many a cowboy shirt with burning Sambuca dripping down the button.
Ridiculous. Listen, the world we're going back into, that you're going to go back into, especially when you hit the road and tour, it has changed dramatically. But so has the music business. Do you recognize it? Does it seem like you're going to have to do some adapting?
Yeah, it terrifies me, to be honest. We've already adapted, obviously, just to get through the pandemic. My fear is that the kind of adaptations that we've made are going to be popular to some people, to some sectors of the industry. There's going to be pressure to maintain some of the things we've done. And I, personally, and Melissa's a lot more flexible than I am, and she's also younger. But I'm a bit like the guy on a rocking chair in his deck yelling at the kids to get off his lawn. I don't want to keep live streaming, and I don't want to have to maintain an active relationship online the way we have finessed and nurtured it over the last year and a half. Now, we probably will to some degree. Of course, we will. We've developed a really great rapport with our Patreon fans. And they've been there in our corner for a long time, and we owe them a debt of gratitude, and that's been fine. We'll do that. We'll keep doing that. But I want to go back on the road in a bus or a van. I want to play venues. I want to play in front of people, and I want to go into the studio and make records. And I personally want that to be the way it goes. My fear is that we're going to feel this pressure. Well, you can do some of that, but the modern pattern, the modern model is going to be, you're going to spend a lot more time in your home studio, a lot more time interacting on TikTok. And if that's the case, I'd rather just deliver the Toronto Star.
It's an interesting time. I mean, pandemic aside, we're also, in a climate crisis. And, when your job entails traveling constantly, what does that look like? I think we're constantly, and then push that aside, just look at the instability of the music industry. Artists, trying to carve out a living and trying to find their place in kind of an oversaturated market that is all through like streaming, and we get very little of those revenues. So it is a confusing time, generally speaking, for everyone, but I think in the arts it's especially so. And yeah, I think like Luke said, that desire to just do what we do, I feel that as well, because it's we know how to do that. We know how to get on a stage and play for people, and we know how to get in the studio and write music and record it and create. So the uncertainty that kind of swirls around that, I think sometimes we just kind of like plug our ears and pretend it's not there.
I do think that there are a lot of things that have changed throughout the pandemic. Like a lot of things, have been adapted. Like there's this huge culture of people, everywhere across the country, across the Western world, maybe the whole world, of people being outdoors more and patio culture. And I think that's really a good thing. If people are communicating, they're looking each other in the eye. There's this feeling of energy and joie de vivre on the streets of Toronto. In the West End where we live, for sure, you walk down Bloor Street and there's hundreds of people sitting outdoors having a beer. And I think that's great. That's what it's like when you go to Germany. That's what it's like when you go to Holland. And I think that's one of the greatest things about European cities is that they've learned that people spending time together outdoors is actually a good thing. So I would like to retain that. I also I think that there's been some good things to come from it, and the music industry will have probably improved in some ways as well. And so I don't want to. It may be a luxury that's too expensive for us to think we can simply go back to the way things were. And I'm prepared for the possibility that people are going to say, you know what, we just have, some things have to change. And that's fine. That's what'll happen. I'm just, I'm digging my heels in.
Okay. One final thought here. It just dawned on me that when we, CKUA is listener supported, donor supported radio. It's been closing in on 100 years now. And we're trying to raise $1 million every 6 months to stay on the air and keep the music flowing. But what we get back with the donations are comments. And we're reading hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails that come in with the donations. And they're basically all independent, but they're all saying the same thing. And what they're saying is, we need that music in the room with us now. It's absolutely vital that we hear the sound of your voice and the sound of the music. It's saving us from going crazy. And so the power of music showed itself over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it really has. I don't know. There's been so many peaks and valleys, emotional peaks and valleys. Like one day of feeling like I just can't get out of bed, or we can't survive, or one of us is, or we're both like feeling horribly depressed and scared, and like, what does the future hold? And then other days where we're walking with our son, and he's jumping and bouncing off the walls and climbing people's fences and laughing and pointing at things in the world that he thinks are fantastic. And we just think, what a privilege and what a beautiful time to be alive. I remember being at the BMX park with Jimmy. I took him down to the BMX park. And this BMX park that's near the High Park in Toronto, it's beautiful, manicured. There's like 5 different courses for different ages and abilities. And I was marveling at another parent. I was saying, because when I was a kid, I had a BMX and I rode it up and down the riverbanks of the Assiniboine and the Red Rivers in Winnipeg. And it was fun, but it was pretty gonzo. Like, you never know what was going to happen, who was going to be down there. If you fall into the river, you're just dead. And I was marveling at the quality of this BMX park. And I was saying to this mother who was there, I said, what a great time to be alive. And she looked at me like I had 3 heads. She's like, really? You think this is a great time to be alive? And I was like, okay, I get your point, but this is pretty special.
And one more thing. I'm trying to figure out, it's driving me crazy, where you guys riffed on the artwork on the album. Because it's kind of like almost like the Stones' 2,000 Years from Home, Light Years from Home. And it's a little bit of Jimi Hendrix colors and stuff going on the edges. How did this come together, this amazing melting cake here?
Well, our friend Lyle Bell from Edmonton, who is in the band The Wet Secrets, shout out. Whitey Houston, just a genius human, genius musician, genius visual artist, photographer. He does all of our photography, all of our art direction. So he just went to town with all the artwork on, these last few records for us. But yeah, this one in particular, him and Caitlin Beach from Six Shooter, they built this set, this, with pinks and oranges and fake flowers, and it's just like, your psychedelic nightmare.
Well, he also had a kaleidoscopic lens to put on his camera.
Yeah.
So it would just give it that kaleidoscope thing. I mean, we were unabashed about like let's get into like psychedelic era late 60s. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're such hippies. And lastly, you've kind of freaked me out a bit with the mention of yet another album coming in January. Can you tease anything else you can tease with?
Yeah, so we have another record in the can. I don't know when it's coming out, but sometime in the new year.
We were both listening to a lot of early to mid to late 70s country music. That Mike Judge animated interview show called Tales from the Tour Bus.
Yes.
First year of that. all these amazing tales. Anyway, that right around the same time I was binge watching that, I was also listening to all of the Emmylou Harris and Brian Ahern produced records. So Emmylou and Brian were married. Brian Ahern is from Halifax.
Yep.
And he's a producer. He did all of Anne Murray's records, I think, at the same time.
That's right.
In the same period. This is probably all trivia that you're aware of course. But so the records that they'd made together are some of my favorite records ever made. And Melissa and I, we bonded pretty hard over listening to that era of country music. And, John Prine died right around the same time. There was a lot of, and then I discovered Tyler Childers right around the same moment. So I was kind of freaking out over this kind of retro, but not too far back country music stuff. And I ended up writing a whole pile of songs, and then Melissa wrote a whole pile of songs. And Shauna and at Six Shooter, was like, well, why not? Let's just go make another record. And we modeled it after the relationship between Emmylou Harris and Brian Ahern. So we produced it together, and we sort of tried to replicate that relationship somewhat faithfully. There's no overdubs except for I think I put one percussion track on one song and a shaker on another. And other than that, it all went down pretty much live off the floor. We had Burt Carroll playing pedal steel, and then we just recorded it like a country band in the 70s, and that's what it is.
And so it begs the question: what band will be touring all of 2022? Will it be a duo? Will it be
all of the above?
All of the above. Fantastic. Which is exactly what we want from Whitehorse. That's exactly what we want from Whitehorse. Surprise me.
Yes.
Thank you. I've taken up enough.
Yeah, that's a good question. We are a moving target, which I realize is a nightmare from a marketing perspective.
Sure.
But when I think about so many artists that I love, like if I think about Neil Young or John Lennon or Sheryl Crow or Lucinda Williams, these artists, Tom Petty. Like if Tom Petty plays a country song or a rock and roll song or a folk song or a blues number or a psychedelic jam, nobody bats an eye. It's like, no, that's fine. That's cool. That's the way it goes. And I think it's a real luxury to be able to do that if your audience will follow you down those rabbit holes. And I'm not sure if we've succeeded, but we certainly have gone very far astray from whatever original musical mission statement we might have had.
I hope you're happy, you two.
Yes.
Very.
We are.
Good on you, because that's the best. That's the best revenge of all, that you have each other. You got Jimmy. Jimmy's in the band, and you're making music that we can all hold close to our hearts. Take care of yourself, will you?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Thanks for calling.
Yeah.
The Mulligan's 2 podcast, Luc Doucet and Melissa McClelland are Whitehorse. Check out their new album, Strike Me Down, on Six Shooter Records. Next week, the tricky thing is, I have 2 interviews that are going to be running on the Stew. David Gogo in the first hour, and Afi Yervinen, Bahamas, in the second hour. And they're both albums are coming out on the same day. So the deal is, which one are we going to have on the podcast? I don't quite know yet. They're both coming. Don't worry about it. Don't forget, if you can, please subscribe on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and go to mulliganstew.ca for all the details. Thank you, Corey Wood. Take care of yourself, everybody. Careful, 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 careful.